When all is done, is that his voice I am hearing? Come away, my precious one. Is he calling me? Is he calling me? I will rise up, rise up, then I'll bow down and lay my crown at his wounded feet. I will rise up, then I'll bow down and lay my crown at his wounded feet. There's a story.
Welcome to the celebration of the life of John Stephen Burk. This morning is a celebration because John knew the Lord. The Word of God says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13, that we do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. We grieve, but we don't grieve like those who have no hope, because we have a hope. And that hope is that the Lord has taken John to be with him forever in eternity. Amen. Amen. Where pain can't reach John, cancer can't reach John, but love, hope, peace, and comfort can. And he wants to see us there with him. You know, this morning we're going to celebrate John's life, John's personality, every part of John's personality. If you don't know what I'm talking about, by the time you're there, you will. I enjoy spending so much time with Kim, you and your family, hearing and learning about John and all the stories and things that he's done. You know, I never wear a red tie with a blue suit, but I'm wearing red and blue today because it's Cubs. And that's John's team. And normally our church is a St. Louis, Cardinal, and Kansas City Chief church, but John has united our church for the first time. So he's here with us in president. What I'm going to ask you guys to do is, I'm going to lead a prayer, and then we're going to have a song. Then the obituary will be read. But then after that, we're going to have an opportunity for people who have memories of John. Funny memories from childhood, adulthood, every type of memory you have. We're going to give you guys an opportunity to come up and share a memory. So I want you to think in on one if you haven't yet. And if you feel the stirring to come up and share, please share. I'm going to bring the microphone right down, where you just come right up, and we're going to celebrate the life of our brother John. As we go deeper into this ceremony, I'd like for y'all to please pray with me. Heavenly Father, thank you for John Burk. Thank you for the time that we had to know him, to laugh with him, to work with him, to hear his voice, to fellowship with him. And God, we're going to shed tears of grief, God, which is normal, which is healthy, which is necessary. But God, I pray that you also bless us to shed tears of joy, share laughter, and share good memories that you have blessed us with to experience with John. Be with our ceremony, be with our time, and thank you, Jesus, for giving us the hope that it doesn't stop here. It only gets better for those who are in Christ. We thank you that John is. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
A beautiful life. Each day I'll do a golden deed by helping those who are in need. My life on earth that I have done, where there will be no setting sun.
At this time, Curly Clark will now read the obituary of John.
It's my great privilege to be here today as we honor and remember my old friend and colleague, John Stevens. And as I read these words, I want you to remember that I'm simply giving voice to this wonderful tribute written by John's very talented and loving daughter, Holly. Your father is John Stevens, the John Stevens? My husband's uncle had been a fan. He approached my father as others might have John Lennon or Elvis Presley, shaking and starstruck. The year was 2012, and John Stevens had been off the air for years, a casualty of evolving radio formats. Dad was surprised that someone remembered him, but how could they not? People just don't forget John Stevens. John Stevens was born John Stevens Burk on February 26, 1952, to John and Mary Burk in Gary, Indiana. An only child, he was known by friends and family as Steve. Throughout his early life, he happily spent that in Crown Point, Indiana. He was also a certified son of the American Revolution, something of deep importance to his father. As the child of John Stevens, it's difficult to reconcile his two incarnations. To his kids and those who knew him best, he was always goofy and big-hearted. He was also a natural showman, which made his vocation of choice the perfect fit. But when people talk about Dad, they're also quick to mention his disarming shyness and reserve, the version of him that lived off the air and came out when he wasn't familiar with those he was around. Still, he had a way of putting all that aside when there was a spotlight to be seized. As early as his high school years, Dad was in the business of wowing. When legendary jazz saxophonist Arnie Lawrence visited his high school, John Stevens emerged to show off his mad talent at the drums, flipping his drumsticks and channeling his drumming hero, Buddy Rich. The school recognized his talent for the first time, and Dad was instantly cool. Dad excelled at broadcasting school, and he spent his early career in Indiana and Illinois, both working in radio and showing off behind the drums. It wasn't until his uncle, Samuel Burk, owner of the Community Broadcasters, Inc., contacted Kurt Brown in Springfield, Missouri, that John Stevens came to Springfield and established a name for himself at KTTS. He temporarily moved to Kansas City for another radio job, but Springfield was in his blood by then, and the move didn't last. In 1980, Dad returned home and took a job at the now gone KICK Radio. He performed the middays at KICK, including his favorite hour of the day, Oldies, from noon to 1. His Springfield listeners will remember him as a local voice of country music, but Dad's passion was always golden oldies, particularly Three Dog Nights and the Beatles. It wasn't long before John Stevens returned to KTTS, first in the evening shift, and then eventually making his way back to the morning drive on KTTS AM. Dad's signature style was largely inspired by his radio hero, Larry Lujak, who was a top 40 DJ at WLS in Chicago. During a mid-1980s visit to WLS, Dad was among the station visitors who were invited to join Lujak on the air. Well, Dad seized the opportunity, and his natural charisma earned praise from Lujak, who told him he should have his own radio career. Well, this, of course, started a brief on-air conversation about Dad's career as John Stevens of KTTS in Springfield, Missouri. To have gotten to meet his hero and to have that hero recognize his talent was to Dad the stuff of dreams. Arbitron ratings confirmed what everyone who remembers John Stevens already knows. He had a strong following, and he was quite popular with the ladies. In 1983, John Stevens' talent as a writer-producer earned KTTS first-place honors at Missouri Broadcasters Association, and recognition in 1988 at District Addy Awards. In 1990, Dad was honored with a nomination from the National Association of Broadcasters for the prestigious Marconi Radio Award. He was one of only 5 nominees across the nation. John Stevens dominated the airways of the greater Springfield area until the late 1990s. He was what locals would call a shock jock, often saying things not for the faint of heart, laughing at his own irreverence. His sense of humor had a modest range from the crude to the downright silly. If he wasn't wowing you with his witty observations, he'd surely get you to crack a grin by making a face. For Dad, life was better lived while laughing. Getting him to take anything seriously often required Herculean effort. But his ability to find joy in the little things was what made the struggle he faced in 2015 bearable. For him, his wife, his children, and the multitudes of friends and family who fought alongside him. Not once throughout his illness did he stop laughing, especially at himself. Among other things, Dad was known for his undying loyalty to the Cubbies. He ate, drank, and breathed all things Chicago. Friendly rivalry was welcome, especially with his family and friends who would often visit him wearing the cardinal red of his enemy. But it was all in good fun, and Dad was always prepared, decked out head to toe in Cubby blue. He also had a penchant for quoting the things he loved, ensuring that visits included words of wisdom from philosophers Rodney Dangerfield and George Carlin. John Stevens Burk succumbed to lymphoma on January 2nd, 2016, and he passed away peacefully in his sleep at Cox South Hospital with his wife, Kimberly, and Heiberger, that's a nice name, Burk, I prefer Burk, at his side. John is survived by his wife, Kimberly, his 4 children, Kelly Ann Weatherford, Holly Denise Atkinson, Stephen Lauren Burk, and Jody Lee Burk, and 3 grandchildren, Taylor Weatherford, Colby Weatherford, and Samuel Burk. The visitation was held here at East Grand Church of Christ last evening, and of course today his tribute to John is here as well. In accordance with his wishes, he will be cremated. Also in accordance with his wishes, his children will do their best to lay him to final rest at Wrigley Field, where we know he will be the happiest. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations to the Fairhaven Children's Home. And as Dad would say, as he always did signing off, be good to yourself and to somebody else.
Thank you, Shirley. At this time now, we're going to open up to you to share any memories or experiences you've ever had with John. It's going to be very informal, just as John would have it. And I'd like to open up the time right now for you to speak from your heart. Any friends or family that'd like to share a memory with John?
Good morning. For John, I had to wear my St. Louis Cardinals and when I walked in, Kim hugged me and said, "Really? Really? Did you really try to tighten it?" I met John, wow, a long time ago. I knew Kim from working at Cox, and we worked 11 to 7, and we had interesting conversations, and then she introduced me to John. Then I went through a real dark time in my life, and real ugly divorce, and John and Kim invited me to live with them. So I was with them for a while, and John and I had great conversations. We had conversations about the Cubs. But then we had conversations about the real team, the Cardinals. And John and I would always laugh about that. John and I and my wife, Kim was pregnant at the time, we went to St. Louis with another friend they did. For the life of me, I can't remember his name, but we went up to see the Cardinals and the Cubs play. It was just a wonderful experience, especially since the Cardinals won. Then we came back, and as we were coming back through Fenton, one of John's fellow passions that he liked, and I could never understand it. John, I still don't understand it. It was White Castle hamburgers. Holy cow. So, well, brought home for Kim. I want Kim and the family to know that I love John. He was a great great friend. And when he gets spread over Wrigley Field, if it happens that this year, his Cubbies may actually win their second World Series. My boy don't have something to say about it. But brothers and sisters, he is a fine man, and I love him to death. And he's gone home to our Father in heaven. We'll see him again. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. John was my brother. I don't know if I can do it. When John was on the radio, he was able to enjoy some anonymity. Didn't necessarily have a face that people recognized. Some did, but when he did the TV program, he didn't have quite the same ability to go out in public without being recognized. And we got on an elevator together one time, and there was a fellow on the elevator, and he looked, and you could see on his face he was recognizing, and he said, "Aren't you?" And before he could go any further, John, and you know that little, he kind of turned his mouth a little bit sideways, and oh, well, you look like, and nope. And then the third time, when the fellow looked at him again, he said, "You're John Stevens." And then, okay, yeah, he reluctantly admitted that he was John Stevens, and it was fun just to see. He always was a little hesitant to talk to people that he didn't know and be in the limelight, but he was always gracious. He was always gracious. He was a good man.
Morning. What a great celebration today, and we're so privileged to have had John in our lives. Thanks for letting us be a part of his life. We, several of us here are going to say a few things about some of the radio things. Back to the obituary that Curly read a while ago, there was a little blurb in there about his stint in Kansas City. I was a little bit of a part of that. I'd been in radio for about 5 minutes, and I got a call from Don Paul, who was program director at the time, saying, "You need to be at work at 6 tomorrow morning, you're the morning man." And I said, "What about John?" "Well, Kurt just fired him." I said, "Why?" "Well, John announced on the air that he was taking the job in Kansas City at KCKN. And that's taboo. So you're the morning guy." So I replaced John Stevens on KTTS AM, and I sucked. I was awful. But I did create Tracy Trueheart. Wave your hands, Tracy. She was a part of a little soap opera I wrote. It was fun. John and I went to Chicago multiple times to watch the Cardinals and the Cubs play. Me in my Cardinal garb, he in his Cub garb. And we had so much fun together, so much fun. He has more faith than anyone in this room because he's a Cubs fan. And let's face it, this past season for the Cubs was an absolute gift from God. He had the time of his life watching the Cubs beat the Cardinals in the playoffs. Now, That was the Cubs World Series, but I guarantee you that was John's World Series. But next year, I'm afraid he may have a little hand in what's going to happen, so we'll have to wait and see about that. Certainly, times that we spent together were cherished. Kim let me know that John was in a room on Saturday before he died. My wife and I got the opportunity to go see him. And John was very well aware that I was Mike Edwards and that Renee was Renee Steele, and he called her Reedy all the time. And he called her Reedy there in the room. But John was having a hard time communicating, and I, being hard of hearing now, had a hard time hearing. But John said something to me about dying. I think John knew that the time had come. And he's now with our Heavenly Father. And he's not in pain. And we have all these memories that we can share together. And we are so blessed. God bless John. God bless you all. And I'm going to let Russ talk.
Here we are slaving over a hot microphone. I used to play country music, polka style. Forgive me if I have a hard time through this. See my tie? Today is Elvis's birthday, and I wore this for John. I had the opportunity to go with John to Graceland, and I don't think we ever stopped laughing on that trip. From the time we got on the bus to the time we came home. And I don't know if anyone's been to Graceland on their tours, but you have the opportunity to go through the Memorial Gardens or wherever Elvis and his family are laid to rest. Very somber, very serious, and I'm with John. And this is 15, 20 years after Elvis supposedly died, right? And there are folks just wailing, ladies, he's dead, he's dead. And John and I looked at each other and almost busted a gut, trying to hold it back. And for years after that moment, I'd walk into the studio and we'd look at each other, and without anything else, we just say, he's dead. So, calm down with it, John.
I've stood in front of 50,000 people wearing bands on. I've never been this scared my entire life. I have two quick stories about John because I'll lose it. One of my memories is, and the guys who work at KT will remember this, John went through a health kit. And we used to do sit-ups in the studio between songs. And I always wondered what in the world people coming in to pick up prizes thought was going on in that room. Because all of a sudden, John's head would pop up. And then we'd go back on. And then it would pop back up. And then we'd go back on. I would have loved to have known what they were thinking at that moment. And the other real quick, I don't know if everybody knows this, John worked with me and John for a brief period of time. And he got this bright idea that he wanted to learn self-defense. Do you know the story? Oh my God. I happen to know about that much. So we're in the studio again, on the air. And the receptionist comes to tell us that our guest has arrived. I don't remember who it was, it doesn't matter. We're in the studio, and John has me in a full headlock. Without skipping a beat, she comes in, he's like lover's quarrel, leave us alone. Proud that John is my friend, God is good. Thank you guys.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda. I worked with John at KTTS from the mid-'80s to the late '90s. And he followed me in the mornings. I did the all-night show. and John followed me every morning. And John had a penchant for being late. And John, I always knew when I was getting ready to go off the air, a little light would blink on the phone. I'd pick up the phone, John would be like, I'm down by the convenience store. I'm going to be late. Could you run in the studio, put on the long Alabama song, the 4.5-minute Alabama song, and set up my intro, and I'll be right there. Gotcha, John. Well, so it happened, Kurt didn't particularly like that long Alabama song. And after this happened several times, Kurt warned John. He said, John, if I hear that 4.5-minute Alabama song early in the morning one more time, not going to be good. Well, John didn't care. And so the 4.5-minute Alabama song played, and John got suspended for 3 days. The other story, and John didn't care, vacation. The other story I have to tell is about Kim. And Kim and I were friends, and we'd met off and on the radio, on the request line. And this was before Kim knew John. And Kim, she and I talked for a while, and one time she said to me, she said, could you introduce me to John Stevens? I just gotta meet John Stevens. I said, I bet we could arrange that, and the rest is history. So those are just a couple of memories that I have with John. We're all gonna miss him, and there'll never be another one like him. Thank you.
I'm not a speaker in any way, and I'm not the kind of person who people to talk, so this is killed. But John would want to know the story. I am the one who brought out to him, John's family, his love of Three Dog Night. I knew who he was for years. He was my favorite disc jockey. I had moved to Boston for several years and was absolutely miserable because I could not find another disc jockey who was even remotely as good as John. And I was just stunned that in a Boston area you couldn't find somebody that was at least close to that personality. When I moved back here, my first day at my new job, the radio was on. I had no idea what it was. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, here comes John. And I had the biggest smile on my face. And from then on, that radio stayed all day. And I waited down. I think Summer led into John, yes. Summer, no offense, I love you, but I couldn't wait for you to leave because I wanted to hear John. I'm sorry. Okay, the story of how I actually met John is actually very strange. I have a very different relationship with John. Kim knows all about this. John's favorite band besides the Beatles is Three Dog Night, which is also mine. And they were coming to the fair, and I decided, I was just listening to John. He was on the radio talking about them, and I could tell in his voice he just could not wait to see this concert. And he was talking about it, and he mentioned a certain song that he said, this is the song they're going to open the show with. And that was fine, except he was wrong. He didn't know he was wrong because he had been watching the DVD over and over and over, and he had that thing memorized. But that thing has been edited, and he hadn't seen a show, and I had seen a few dozen in various states. And so I knew what the opening song was. And instead of just letting it go, letting him say, I picked up the phone and I called him. And I said, John, you're wrong about the opening song. He says, I am? Yes, you are. Well, if it's not whatever he said, which I can't think of now, what is it? So I told him, no, that's not the opening song. And I said, it is, John, it really is. How do you know this? So I explained, I've seen him so many times. That started a friendship. That instant call, we connected because I said, I know because they're my favorite band, all-time favorite band. And I've seen so many of their shows, and I just knew he was wrong. So he started asking me what I knew. We ended up talking on the phone just that first afternoon for 2 hours. He would go to commercial breaks. Whenever he'd have time, he'd come back to the phone. He'd say, can you hold on? I would hold on. He'd come back. I was at work, so if I had a customer come in, I worked in a little shop that wasn't that busy, so I often had time and there'd be nobody there. So I'd say, well, if I have to go, I'll hang up and call you back. This went on for, I think, 2 weeks at least before the concert. We met in person at a concert Three Dog Night did at the Welk Theater about 10 years ago. They were doing 2 nights, and John couldn't make it the first night. So at this point, he had no idea what I looked like. I could have been 400 pounds and toothless, and he would not have had a clue. And I told him, I will find you. The second night, since he couldn't be there, I said, I will find you, and I will come introduce myself. Well, he couldn't leave it at that. He decided to get up on stage after the opening act finished, and he picks up the microphone. And I'm sitting like in the 3rd row or something, and he says, where's Jill? I'm kind of a shy person. I can't believe I'm standing here right now. So I thought I didn't hear that. Well, my husband was with me and a couple other relatives. And they all looked at me, and I just went, I didn't hear anything. And he looks around the audience, nobody reacts, and then he goes, where's Jill? At this point, everybody's looking. My family's all going. There was no hiding because I was right in front of him. So we met briefly in between the concert, the opening concert and Three Dog Night. He goes on stage with one of the other DJs, and I apologize if he's here and I can't remember which one. And they had to sing American Pie between the 2 parts. And John had given me this look, and even though I had barely just met him in person, the look in his face was like sheer disgust, not even disgust. It was like, please God, don't make me do this. But he went on up there, the 2 of them, and I see him turn around. I can tell he looks uncomfortable. I see him turn around and just pick something up and put in his hands. What he didn't realize was he had picked up the tambourine that his favorite singer in the world was going to play in the next act. Corey Wells of Three Dog Night plays the tambourine. Oh, not just tambourine, he's lead singer, but he also plays tambourine. So I realized what John was holding in his hand. He had no clue. He came off that stage, and I made a beeline to get to him. And I said, do you realize what you're holding? He said, no, just pick something up. No, it wasn't just the tambourine. I said, that's Corey's tambourine. Oh my God. It was so funny. He just had this look, and he said, are you sure? How many people can play tambourine, John, in Three Dog Night? Oh my God. And then he just looks at me with this strangeness look in his face, and he says, do you think he'll be mad? All I could do was laugh. From then on, we became good friends. Kim knows this, we have become. He referred to me as his music soulmate because we were identical. Everything we liked was the same. Same band, same songs, everything. We started going to concerts together. John was not a fan of Kim's country music. Kim was not a fan of Three Dog Night. So John and I would go to Three Dog Night. Usually with my husband, sometimes with my friend Debbie, sometimes with a couple other people. Stephen was there once. We did this several times. We got to go on several trips, and not just local. We made a couple one overnight trip to Oklahoma, and we had a lot. And we got to know, I was able to introduce him to some of the band that I happened to know for a few years. It never ended. I mean, right up until the end, even when he was weak and didn't look like he could ever possibly get up and go anywhere again. If I called him or he called me, it was always, when's Three Dog Night coming back? And that's the John I knew. All music, all the time, laughs. I love it. Thank you.
and trying to talk to him, trying to do the best. I'm Steven, I'm his son. I have a lot of memories with him, but my favorite memory, we went to a lot of Cubs Cardinals games, and contrary to popular belief, the Cubs did win a few of them. Always going to White Castle and stuff. But, like I said, lots of memories, but one of my favorite memories was when we went to Wrigley Field, and the Cubs were in second place at the time, and they were playing the Brewers. The Brewers were up like 8 games. It was like June or so. And the Cubs being the Cubs, they were down 5-0 in the first inning. And, you know, it's going to be a long day. And we actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we had tickets to tomorrow's game, but we bought tickets to that day's game that day. And so anyways, they're down 5-0. They come back, and it's 5-4 in the bottom of the 9th. And 2 outs, we're on first. You know, it's not looking good. And my dad, at the very beginning of the game, we were sitting in really bad seats behind a pole at Wrigley, if you've all been there before. And in the bottom of the 9th, we were on the first base line, great seats. And Aramis Ramirez hits a 2-run home run. I'll go ahead and do it. He looked at me like, "We won? We won?" And just his expression, I'll never forget, just, ah! So, it was the happiest moment of our lives at that point. And even years later, I mean, we talked about it and said that was the best game we'd ever been to. And like I said, I've got a lot of memories with him, but, you know, just the pure ecstasy. So, I'm really gonna miss him.
I hate to rain on everybody's parade since we're here to celebrate, but my name is Don Paul, and Kurt Brown and I hired John Stevens when he came running down here to Springfield. And we hired him by mistake. We had 2 candidates from the state of Indiana, and Kurt and I had listened to their tapes, and they were both pretty good, and I knew the guy I wanted to hire, and somehow I told Kurt, I says, let's bring this guy in from Indiana and talk to him, and, you know, see if we can put together a deal. And Kurt said, well, I'll contact him and fly him up here. So he did. We got together, and at the end of the meeting, we cut a deal and decided to bring John down here. And so I drove him back to the airport. I was driving him back to the airport, and I said, well, what's life like in Vincennes, Indiana? And he said, I don't know, I'm from Gary. So I guess he was hired by mistake, but it's the best mistake I ever made.
First of all, I want to tell you that I know Kim and her family are so grateful for each and every memory you're sharing. I think I've discovered listening to you guys that John reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. And what I mean by that is, you know, the wizard was behind a curtain. When he was behind that microphone, he was completely different. He was on, he had everybody believing, they were in the journey with him. But when you pulled that curtain back, he was a totally different person. And that's where I want to give you my testimony of what John Stevens meant to me, and his wife Kim, and his daughter Jody. My husband passed away in 2001. He considered John one of his closest and dearest friends. From him, I met Kim and the lovely family. When my husband passed away, there was not one year on the birthday or the death day of my husband that I did not receive a call. That's been 14 years, folks. That's dedication and love. That's the John behind the curtain. That's the Kim behind the curtain. You know what? In the end of the program, the Wizard of Oz flew away in that balloon, and he went home. And that's what's happened to John. He went home. I want to remember that this angel over here, who made sure she kept in touch with me, that I do the same for her, and I hope you all will too. I was at one of the concerts Kim was referring to, or Jill was referring to with John. And I have dizzy spells. Imagine being a blonde and a dizzy spell. And Kim had told him, and Jill had told him, watch her that she doesn't pass out, because sometimes it happens. And the whole concert, a little bit, are you going to pass out? Let me see. Not yet. Keep watching. But he took me to both times that I went, he took me aside and he said, Debbie, I want to ask you a question. And this was a serious John. This was a very seriousness I saw in him that I don't think many people saw, except his family. He said, I want to ask you something. It's been 14 years. Why have you not dated? I said, John, where do we find somebody in Burk? I mean, I don't hang out there. And he said, well, what about church? I said, well, there's no single men in my church, and I'm pretty sure the women wouldn't like it if I did. Don't want to die that early. But he said, you know, your husband would want you to go on and find someone to be happy. You know he would want that. And I'm his friend. And I want you to know he's telling you it's okay. Well, my husband had told me that. He died suddenly, but he had already told me if something happens, you go on, you be happy. And I said, if something happens to you, you better not, or I'll haunt you in your dreams. Just kidding him, of course. But the fact that John cared enough to tell me that speaks very highly of what a good friend he truly was to his friends. Because my husband had gone for many, many years, but he still was a loyal and faithful friend in those moments when he spoke that to me. And that's the same kindness I pray God would give me to show to Kim and his family. Fly on, John. We know you're home. Thank you guys so much.
I don't know that I'll last 10 seconds, but Stephen, was that the time, like the next day, I went, we lost 13-4. Last time I've been to Wrigley. Wow. Well, I'm Dale. I have the illustrious title of being John's best friend from Indiana. And I'll try to do this. I think, I'm pretty sure I've got the privilege of knowing him longer than anybody in this room. And could probably go on all day telling you good stories about John as a teenager. And I'm loving all these other stories. I haven't heard some of them. But actually, I can tell you about the real John. How's that? He grew up in Indiana, and his mother and all of us called him Steve. So if I slip up and call him Steve, just bear with me. But we met in 1968. I moved to Crown Point. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and moved there just in time for starting the senior year. John was a junior, so 1 year behind me. In Gary, I spent my evenings going downstairs with my drum set, banging away with the rock and roll records, mostly the Rascals. The Young Rascals had a drummer named Dino, and Dino was the best. Dino was the best because he had jazz roots. He grew up with jazz music. If you know a little bit about music, you know you have to be really innovative with jazz. You have to hear things in the song and just go after it. And so Dino, wow, he was the guy. And I remember Rascal albums being out there that I just couldn't afford to buy. I was just a paper boy at the time. There was one that had a big picture of Dino on the front page. Wow. So my first day, the first or second day of school, I'm in the band room, in the drum section. This tall kid comes walking in, big droopy eyes. And I think I'm gonna like this guy. He's carrying a Rascals album. Oh, and it's the one with Dino right there on the cover. And I said, dude, I said, you're hip to Dino? And he goes, oh yeah, Dino's the best. And I said, yeah, Dino's the best. And there's the connection right there. We connected right like that. 46 and a half years later, we're still connected. And from that point, every day we'd go over to his house and go down to his basement, right there on Court Street. 511 Court Street. Put those rascals on full blast, and we learned how to play drums, listening to Dino. Oh, and Buddy Rich. But nobody's ever going to reach Buddy Rich, but you can dream, But that's the way it started. I don't, back then I don't remember White Castle. We went every day, we'd bang on the drums. This was after school, this would be summer of '69. Those folks were working, and by then I had graduated and I was working at the steel mills at night, so every morning, straight over to Steve's house, bang away, full blast, full loud, and we'd go to Burger King Whopper. The summer of '69, it was a Whopper every day of the week. We never seemed to, I always seemed to think that it was original and special every time we did. We had an expression back there, if you went to go get something, you went to cop something, so we called it, let's go cop a Whopper. And eventually we shortened that down, let's go cop a Whop. But that's just us, it's just kind of silly kind of humor, just goofy stuff that was just between he and I. He's a special guy, really special guy. But yeah, we saw Three Dog Night together, and we saw the Rascals. The Young Rascals, we saw them, and Dino did an amazing drum solo, and tossed that stick in the air, and Jesse reached up and grabbed it. My Steve. I know he had that stick for long. I think he lost it somewhere along the line, but he got Dino's stick. Matter of fact, we went to see Buddy Rich together. Probably there was a picture up there. There was Steve and Buddy Rich, and I took the picture. To this day, I'm still asking, why didn't I hand him the camera? So take a picture of me and Buddy Rich, That's okay. That's okay. I can't believe I'm doing okay. Oh my goodness, we saw Art and the Raiders together. We saw the Crying Change together. Buddy Rich, and later years coming down here every year. Kimberly and Steve took me to, we saw Tammy and Wynette together. Yeah, we can tell it now, but it was the best kept secret. I knew the secret. Springfield's #1 country DJ couldn't stand country music. It was all about rock and roll. If you didn't listen to his shows, when he got to pick out songs, there were the songs that had a little more upbeat, a little Texas or whatever, I forget those. Anyway, years went by, and of course, Kimberly came along, and then Jody came along. One of my best memories, I used to come down that front porch of their house. It's the most gorgeous view out there. Missouri, the hills. It's really peaceful for me, and I loved it. I'd come along, I'd wait a whole year and come a long ways for that view. And there for a while, there was a group called Lone Star. Had a song about on the front porch. He was looking in, and he was looking in because there's a beautiful wife on the floor there. There's a little blonde-haired girl. My favorite line of the song is sipping her little sippy cup of milk. And I remember one year I'm out of the porch, I'm looking out at that beautiful landscape. But then I looked in, and there's Kimberly and a little blonde-haired girl, her sippy cup of milk. I just love her so much. And first time I ever met Kim, she just opened that door and just hugged me and said, "Come on in, your family," and that hasn't changed. So anyway, I could go on all day. I tell you stories about being a teenager. Wow, I'll tell you one story. We were like normal teenagers, and we could get in trouble. But many nights when Mr. Burk, in a deep voice, he'd look at me and say, "Dale, you need to go home now." Me and Steven have to have a talk. Oh no. Good night, Mr. Burk. And there was a night when we were out. We'd go to back then we went to drive-in movies, and we'd go out cruising around. We loved to just play our songs on the radio and just sing along. We'd have to pretend like we were playing our room. times in the car. Just being silly, we like being silly together. But this one morning, it was an accident. So we were in his dad's Buick, and there was an accident, and I cut my head on the dashboard. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. The punchline, though, is we had strict orders to be in by midnight. And Steve gets to call his dad and says, Dad, one, it's 2 a.m. He says, yeah, I know. You know. Number 2, we just wrecked the Buick. And Dale's bleeding. I don't remember how that turned out. I do remember that I went home that the wound was like maybe just 1/8 of an inch, 1/2 an inch up above my hairline. So my mom had to kind of deal with that. She was dressing the wound and all that. And then a couple of years later, it was right on the hairline. A couple of years after that, it was just a little bit under the hairline. And that's about the time that every year I was coming down here in the spring to right around his birthday. Well, Kimberly and I set it up 2 years in a row. We covertly put things together so that I was here to surprise him on his birthday. And after that, it wasn't going to be a surprise much anymore, so I just came down somewhere late February, early March. And every year I live for it. I mean, I lived for, Linda can tell you, 51 weeks out of the year, I'm moping around. And finally, oh, I can do these things, you know. But anyway, every year, first thing he'd do is walk up and look at that scar, and he goes, all right, now it's a 1/2 an inch. Now it's, you know, of course, now it's just totally, you know, no more hair up there. And that's our memories. So, anyway, I could go on. Oh, let's see if I can do this real quick. I have made some notes. I thought I was making these for Shelton, and then it turned out I wasn't making these for Shelton. I wrote these at 4:30 this morning. Didn't sleep last night, but I think what Sheldon was asking me to do is give him some points about just some of Steve's attributes and things. And you guys, well, it's obvious you know a lot of them. You know, some of you know him really well. But a couple things I have written is that I see in him as far as his tendencies, his attributes, is he looks beyond the flaws of others. He loves them. He loves people. He saw the best in another person, and he could highlight that, bring that out in a person. He'd have the patience to allow another person to blossom, to flourish, to be themselves, even if it was a little bit uncomfortable for him. And, right now, quite frankly, I'm thinking of the snakes, the birds, and what do you call it, the whale yesterday? Hamster or guinea pig? Well, guinea pig. Forgive me. But so you know, he just lets Jody be herself, and she loves those animals. I love him for that. Some he did, he could pick out something that he would really like and enjoy, and he would go for it 100%. In Steve's case, as far as I know, the drums and the radio, he loved both of those. He excelled at them. He loved the humor. Kind of grew up on Dick Van Dyke, and Andy and Barney, and some of you don't know who that is, but people with my kind of hairline, we remember Dick Van Dyke. He excelled at making others laugh. I think we all know that. He made you feel at ease. He'd always be poking fun at himself. He was the object of his own jokes. He'd just make you feel good about yourself. Perhaps the biggest thing about Steve, loyalty. He was intense, constant. Even though we joke a lot about the sports and all that, and the Cubs and everything, but to me, that continual loyalty, even in the hard times, he never let up on his dream to a Cubby pennant. But to me, that indicates just this deeper, constant character quality. Loyalty to me as a friend. I ran off to Colorado and he went to Missouri, but it never ended. met, the connection was immediate. So, for 46 and a half years, I like to study the Bible, and sometimes I wonder if we're not like David and Jonathan, we're just that close, that tight. His attention to loyalty and also the small detail. The old-fashioned way of holding the drumstick, you hold this left stick like this. Nowadays we all just kind of hold it like this. But Buddy Rich held it like this. So if Buddy Rich holds it like this, you have to hold it like that. Years later, he said, "Yeah, you're holding the drumsticks wrong." Because I went over to the new way. But even the little things like that, he was just so loyal. His loyalty for Kimberly and the kids and you people here at East Grand. Even those of you who wear the red, where's the guy with the red tie? We're going to talk later. We'll talk later. I got a brand new Cubs jacket. I inherited it. His ability to be likable and to attract people. He would listen and he would remember. Unless the Cubs were on. He would listen and remember. And he could remember detail. I think that really helped him in radio with the humor and all that. Because he'd pick up little details and throw them back at you, get you to laugh at yourself. And just to end, I just want to say one of my really happiest moments is last Thanksgiving in 2014. He came up to Indiana to visit, and in our church we have musicians. And quite frankly, I do drums, I also do some bells and some chimes and a lot of pretty percussion stuff too. But Steve came up to visit, and got to see our other buddy Steve here, and a couple of his other classmates. We just had a really cool reunion. And he was there for Sunday, so I put him on my drum set so he could play in our church. And I went over the other side of the stage and played all the other percussion things, and the tambourines, and the chimes, and all this. And that was just an awesome time. It was just one of the songs we did said joy, incomprehensible joy. And I just said, yeah, that was just so much joy. And I guess, he told me the other day that's the last time he picked up a pair of drumsticks. So I'll close with that. Just thank you for letting me go on and on. I didn't think I'd be able to.
Does anyone else have any other memories? Thank you for sharing at this time. And at this moment, we're going to go back into some of John's favorite songs during worship. And actually, Ken was John's favorite song leader. That's why he's doing it today.
Being a song leader, you can't please everyone. Some songs are fast, some songs are slow, some people like the new ones, some people like the old ones. And anytime I lead singing, I go out to the foyer and and he's always there encouraging and love to sing from the Spirit and just to be able to pour your heart out to God. In music, that's, I think, our strongest communication is we communicate through music. So that always means a lot. And someone says, good job, thank you. As long as you praise God. Amen. I traveled down a lonely road and no one seemed to care. The burden on my weary back had bound me to despair. I often played to Jesus how folks were treating me, and then I heard him say so tenderly, my feet were also weary upon the Calvary road. The cross became so heavy, I fell beneath the load. Be faithful, weary pilgrim, the
told you get to know John if you didn't know him. It's a very unique in very impactful ways. There's not much more that I can say. I feel like you heard almost everything. And that's a blessing when a man lives a life where there's so many people that have stories about him that all you have to do is have those people start talking and you really get to know the man. John touched so many people with his lives. Yesterday at East Grand, we had the visitation, and it's the longest visitation line I've ever seen at East Grand. I mean, the line went straight down this aisle, all the way down the hallway to where our gym is almost. And it stayed that way almost the entire time. Those many people coming to see a man, must be something special about him, Kim. I know you know. You know, I was sitting with Kim's family, it was Monday night, and you guys started talking, and as I was listening to you guys talk, I was like, this is going to be so easy to paint the picture, and I just want to take a moment to try to show people the awesome picture that you guys painted for me of John, as we go behind the curtain, of John Burk. John was tender-hearted and emotional, according to his family. He loved making people laugh, and he loved irritating people too. A lot of people don't know this, but behind the curtain, John could be a very quiet person until he started talking about baseball. The Cubs, Wrigley Field, music concerts. No, John knew a little bit of everything about music. You know, he drummed for Soshi Kabashi in Branson as he was coming up. He loved to spin his sticks when he played too. Music was a huge part of John's life, and he grew up on Perry Como when he was young. Everybody know Perry Como? I had to Google that. Something else you may not know about John that his family told me was John loved to dance. How many people knew that? You know, the first job that John got right out of high school was John was a drummer in a band, Diane and the Country Ropers in Indiana. Now, 19 years at KTTS as a disc jockey, we know, and also in Joplin, and that short stint in Kansas City as a disc jockey. But the cool thing about John and the amazing thing about John was John had #1 ratings wherever he went as a DJ. John Stevens was the radio name that John went by, and he was known for his very funny calls. He was a Springfield icon when it came to disc jockeying. His phone did not stop ringing for a very long time after his last radio show. He kept hearing 3 words: "Are you serious?" He had a great voice. John had the first TV/radio show on Color 10. And for the first time ever, this show allowed Color 10 to be able to compete with Channel 3 for the first time. It's the only time that had ever happened was through John's show. And as said earlier, John had the #1 country music show, even though he hated country music. Now that has to take some skills to be able to do that. You know, John used his voice, unique personality, his sense of humor in life to touch the lives of many people as a disc jockey. But I want to take a moment and talk about the people that John touched that were the most important to him. His wife, Kimberly, his children, Kelly, Howard, Stephen, Joey. I asked Kimberly what's one word you would use to describe John, and Kim told me, unique, one of a kind. Kim and John met at this church at this Tuesday, Thursday school, right down this hallway. John was going to get Stephen, pick him up from Tuesday, Thursday school, and Kimberly was working there as a teacher. And every day, John would poke his head in there and have something to say to Kim. And Kim thought, well, I have another teacher who teaches in here with me, who's very cute, so John must be interested in her. But no, John was interested in Kim. But Kim, undercover, knew all about John Stevenson, and I think she kind of liked him too. She knew John Stevenson, but she was about to meet John Burk after he asked her out. And she said yes, and they hit it off. Kim says that the hairspray industry has lost money and will continue to lose money now that John has gone to glory. Kim says the first time he and John actually kissed, his hair crunched. John used to have this funny saying when it was windy outside. He would say, hairspray and small children alert. Watch out because the wind will blow the hairspray into the nose of small children. They will pass out. Kimberly said John could eat a White Castle with one bite. Stuffed the whole thing in his mouth. I didn't know that. I would have competed with him with that. That's a St. Louis thing. I grew up there. But one thing Kim said is that John was always willing to let Kim's friend move in whenever they needed help, and Jody's friend move in whenever they needed help. John was always willing to open up his home to help someone. Kind, tender-hearted man. Kelly, his oldest daughter, I said, Kelly, what's one word that you would say describes your father, John? And Kelly said, devoted to family in Cubs baseball. John used to love to watch the show Dallas. And every morning, John would turn up the show so loud that it would wake Kelly up in the morning when she was trying to sleep. On purpose, so Kelly would come out of the room and watch Dallas with John. She watched so many episodes of Dallas with John. What's that say about a father? It's not the show, it's who he watches it with that's important. Devoted family man. Kelly tells a story one time of John went to a Cub game, and the game he went to live, he recorded back at home on television. And he was so proud of himself because he was on TV, and when he got home, he put the recording in. When he found himself, he kept showing to Kelly over and over again, this little white dot jumping up in the air over and over again. Like, this is me, this is me, this is me. He wasn't sure that Kelly so much. That was so funny. Put a smile on Kelly's face. Holly, John's daughter, I asked her, Holly, what words describe your father? And she said, loving and hilarious. Holly had a 12th birthday limo party where she had all of her friends come and spend this time with her in this limo. And on that day, John was doing a show. He was on the air, and he let all of Holly's friends say something on the air on the show that day for her birthday. Holly said she became the most popular girl in school that day. Holly also said she had this Wizard of Oz joke, this little song she played on her cell phone. And one day she was trying to keep John motivated and entertained, so she would play this video on her phone of the Wizard of Oz, and every time John saw it, it was so funny to John, and John would laugh like he heard it for the first time, no matter how many times he heard it. Every time he laughed like he'd never heard it before, and he laughed his whole body. That's what she's gonna miss, and that's what she remembers about her loving, hilarious father. I asked Steve the same question about his father. What words come to mind? He gave me one word, and he said, buddy. So you just saw Stephen tell the story about when he went to the baseball game and how Rock Ramirez hit the home run to win the game over the Brewers. And that night, Stephen told me the same story. And I don't know if you were watching Stephen, but it seemed like Stephen got more a kick out of John's response than the actual game, the home run. Stephen also tells a very funny story about John. One day, Stephen and John went to pick Jody up from Cincinnati. And on their way home from Cincinnati, they stopped in Chicago, probably to eat or something. And when they got back in the car, John started going back to Cincinnati on accident without realizing it. So Stephen's the one that picks this up, and he says something very profound. He says, Dad, how come the sun is setting in the wrong direction? Stephen says, John's response was 2 words. You're kidding. John would get lost a lot. But that's what made riding with John so fun, an experience. I asked Jody, what word describes your father best? And Jody said this word, stubborn. One time, Jody tells the story of this bird she used to have, this really big, huge bird. And she was visiting her grandparents in Ohio were visiting, and they had the bird out of the cage, and they started chasing the bird. Now, this large bird's wings were clipped, so the bird could not fly, so the bird's running around. You ever try to catch a bird before? It's very hard. You can destroy a house, break a leg or ankle. It had Jody say these funny words as her grandma and grandfather were running all over the house. Jody said, "Oh, my daddy gonna be mad." And that's just the thing. Even when John wasn't there, John would create an experience thinking about John. And I believe John's going to continue to do that in our life. I had an experience with John, our